Hey guys, tonight we are leaving the comfort of your modern mattress far behind and stepping into the worn-out leather sandals of a scribe in a medieval monastery. It is the dead of night, a time so profoundly dark and silent your own heartbeat sounds like a drum in the cavern of your chest. There is no electric hum, no distant sirens, only the occasional scuttle of a mouse in the rushes on the stone floor, and the howl of a wind that has never known a city skyline. Your eyes fly open not to the gentle chirp of a smartphone alarm, but to the deep, resonant, and frankly terrifying clang of a bell swinging somewhere in the frigid air above you. This is the vigils, the first of the 8 divine offices, and it is calling you to prayer. You probably won't survive this, not because it's dangerous in the conventional sense, but because the sheer, unrelenting exhaustion of this life would break most of us within a week. Your body, accustomed to a single solid block of sleep, is about to learn a new, brutal rhythm of fractured rest and demanding ritual. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're listening from somewhere in the world, maybe feeling that same late-night quiet we're about to lean into, feel free to post your location and local time in the comments. It's always fascinating to see where this little community is drifting off. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The cold is the first thing that truly greets you. It's a living, invasive presence that has seeped through the stone walls of your dormitory over the long winter night. You don't get a private room. You sleep in a long hall lined with simple cots, surrounded by the snores and sleep-muttered Latin of 24 other brothers. Your breath plumes in the air as you swing your legs over the side of the thin straw mattress. There are no socks, just your sandals on cold stone. You pull your heavy, coarse woolen habit tight around you. It itches constantly, a minor penance you've learned to ignore. But right now its warmth is a salvation. You shuffle forward, joining a line of similarly bleary-eyed, shivering men, all moving by rote memory through the absolute blackness. Your world is a tiny island of flickering orange light from a single rush lamp held by the lead monk. Shadows dance and leap on the walls, making the carved saints look like they're twisting in agony. You trudge down the spiral staircase, your hand on the cold central column of stone for guidance, each step taking you deeper into the heart of the monastery and further from the fleeting comfort of sleep. You emerge into the cloister, the square garden courtyard open to the sky. On a clear night, the stars are a brilliant, icy, and indifferent tapestry. Tonight, it's overcast, and a fine, chilling mist hangs in the air, soaking into your wool robes immediately. You can smell the damp earth from the herb garden, the faint, clean scent of rain, and the ever-present, underlying smell of wood smoke from the kitchen fires. The line of monks files into the church, the oratory. It is even colder in here, if that's possible. The stone feels like it's radiating a deep, stored chill from the very earth below. The only light comes from the sanctuary lamp, a single, small red flame flickering near the altar, and the candles on the choir stalls. You find your place in the wooden stall, your body settling into the grooves worn smooth by generations of monks before you. The psalter is already there, open to the correct page. You can't read the words in this gloom, but you don't need to. The chants, the prayers, the responses, they are etched into your soul from endless repetition. This rigid schedule, the herarium, is the absolute backbone of monastic life. It's the mainstream historical fact that structures this entire existence. The day is divided into 8 canonical hours of prayer: vigils, lauds, prime, terce, sext, none, vespers, and compline. This isn't about convenience. It's about sanctifying time itself, offering every moment back to God. Your life is no longer your own. It belongs to the rhythm of the liturgy. As you begin to chant the psalms, your voice joining the low, sleep-thickened murmur of the others, your mind begins to wander. It's a constant battle. The church fathers called it acedia, a spiritual weariness, a sort of existential boredom that is the particular temptation of the monk. Your body is here, but your mind is back on that thin mattress, or dreaming of a warm piece of bread, or, as we'll soon see, doodling in the margins of a book. And here as a quirky tidbit to keep you anchored in the bizarre reality of the time, that faint, unpleasant smell cutting through the incense and damp wool, that's not just the brother next to you. The urine collected in the monastery's latrines, known as the reredorter, wasn't wasted. It was a valuable chemical asset. The ammonia in it was used for a variety of tasks, most notably for degreasing wool before it was spun and woven into the very habits you all wearing. So, next time you think your commute is bad, Just be glad your day doesn't start with a 2 a.m. chant session in a church that might subtly smell of the community's recycled. Well, you get the picture. Historians still argue whether this brutal cycle of sleep deprivation was a form of pious discipline, intended to break the individual will and foster complete reliance on God, or if it was simply an inefficient and unhealthy system that everyone endured because that's just how it had always been done. As you stand there, swaying slightly with fatigue, the Latin phrases rolling off your tongue by muscle memory alone, you feel the truth might be a little bit of both. The chant rises and falls, a river of sound in the dark. Your eyelids grow heavy. The words blur into a meaningless drone. For a moment, you are nowhere, a void in the cold, dark silence between prayers. And then, the bell rings again, signaling the end of vigils. The relief is palpable. You shuffle out, not back to bed, but towards the next task. Dawn is still hours away, but for you, the day has already begun. The first light you'll see today will be the guttering flame of a candle, illuminating a page you are destined to copy, a page where, perhaps, a small, furry distraction is about to make its mark. The echo of the final psalm from vigil still hangs in the frigid air of the church. As you shuffle out, a line of shadows moving through deeper shadow, your body craves the warmth and horizontal plane of your bed. But that is a luxury you will not see again for many hours. Instead, you are funneled from the chilling sanctity of the oratory into the slightly less chilling, but far more mundane, space of the cloister walk. This covered arcade surrounding the central garden is the main artery of the monastery, the covered highway you will pace for a significant portion of your waking life. The stone arches frame the dark, sleeping garden, and the first faint hint of pre-dawn light is just a theoretical concept, a slight lessening of the absolute blackness in the eastern sky. Your next destination isn't rest, it's a different kind of work. For a select few of you, the scriptorium awaits after lauds, but for now, the entire community has a purpose. You move towards the chapter house for the meeting that will formally begin the day, your stomach growling in quiet protest, knowing that breakfast is a distant, uncertain future event. This relentless cycle is known as the divine office, or the opus dei, the work of God. It is the engine of monastic life, the 8 sacred intervals of prayer that fracture the day and night into manageable, holy chunks. You've just completed vigils, the night watch. Next comes lauds at dawn, then prime in the early morning, and so on throughout the day, culminating in compline, the final prayer before you are released back into the fleeting embrace of sleep. Your entire existence is structured around this liturgical timetable. It's more rigid than any modern work schedule, more demanding than any corporate calendar notification. There is no calling in sick, no personal day, no vacation time. The offices are the immovable pillars upon which your life is built, and everything else, meals, work, study, even sleep, must be fit into the gaps between them. This is the mainstream historical fact of monastic temporality. Time did not belong to the individual. It belonged to God and was returned to him in a continuous cycle of praise and supplication. As you take your designated seat in the chapter house, a large room with stone benches built into the walls, you try to focus. The abbot or prior will soon read a chapter from the Rule of Saint Benedict, the detailed guidebook that governs everything from the order of prayers to the amount of wine. Each monk is permitted a hemina, about half a liter, for the record. This daily meeting is also where communal business is discussed, assignments are given, and, most notoriously, where public confessions are made and punishments are meted out. The air is thick with a mixture of fatigue, cold, and a low-level anxiety about who might be called out for a transgression. Did you speak out of turn during the great silence that followed compline? Did you show a lack of fervor during the chanting? Were you caught hoarding a piece of cheese from the kitchen? The discipline can be severe, from extra prayers and fasting to the corporal punishment of the scourge. You sit up straighter, fighting the urge to let your chin drop to your chest. The last thing you need is to be singled out for drowsiness. Here's a quirky, almost absurd tidbit about this life of solemn ritual. All this chanting, this endless recitation of psalms, takes a toll on more than just your sleep schedule. It's murder under vocal cords. Monastic rules actually have specific, practical advice for what to do if you develop a sore throat or laryngitis from all this pious chanting. One recommended remedy was a concoction involving honey, pepper, and, well, let's just say other herbs ground up and mixed with wine. It probably tasted awful. But the real kicker? If you lost your voice completely, you weren't off the hook. You were still expected to stand in your stall during the offices and whisper the words, your breath forming the shapes of the prayers even if no sound emerged. The show, as they say, must always go on. No excuses. Historians still argue whether the overwhelming burden of the divine office was primarily a spiritual exercise designed to achieve unity with God through exhaustion and repetition, or if it was, in a more pragmatic sense, a brilliantly effective tool for social control, keeping dozens of men busy, tired, and constantly focused on a shared, sacred task certainly minimized the opportunities for mischief, dissent, or worse, independent thought. As the chapter meeting drones on, your mind, desperate for a distraction from your own hunger and fatigue, begins to wander again. You think not of God, but of the scriptorium. You imagine the feel of the vellum under your hand, the weight of the quill, the slow, deliberate process of forming letters. It's a different kind of prayer, a silent one. For some, the Yuan, scribe's work is a welcome respite from the vocal strain of the choir. It's a solitary devotion, a meditation in ink. The bell rings again, shattering your brief reverie lauds. Time to return to the church, to stand, and to chant. The dawn is finally beginning to break, a thin, gray light filtering through the high, narrow windows of the church, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air like tiny, lost spirits. You see the faces of your brothers now, pale and drawn in the weak light, all wearing the same mask of resigned devotion. You take a deep breath, and as one, you begin the next round of psalms, your voice joining the chorus, a single thread in the endless, woven tapestry of sound that is your life. The words are a comfort in their familiarity, a prison in their constancy, and as you sing, you can't help but glance towards the door, towards the corridor that leads to the scriptorium. Soon after prime, that's when your real work, the work that might just leave a permanent mark, will finally begin. The final notes of prime fade into the stones of the church, and a different sort of silence descends, one punctuated by the shuffling of feet and the low murmur of monks, dispersing to their daily labors. For you, and a chosen few others, the path leads not to the kitchens, the gardens, or the brewery, but to a heavy, iron-bound oak door at the far end of the north cloister walk. This is the entrance to the scriptorium, the heart of the monastery's intellectual life, and your personal sanctuary in prison for the next several hours. A senior brother, the armarius or librarian, produces a large key from the folds of his habit and unlocks the door. It swings inward with a groan that speaks of damp and disuse, revealing a chamber that is, if possible, even colder than the church. There are no fires allowed in here, ever. The risk to the precious books and parchments is too great. The cold is a permanent resident, a crisp, dry chill that seeps into your bones and makes your joints ache with a dull persistence. You file in, each man moving to his designated writing desk, a slanted surface known as a carrel, positioned to catch the best of the weak northern light filtering through a series of high, narrow windows. This room, the scriptorium, is the mainstream historical fact of how knowledge survived the so-called Dark Ages. It is a factory for words, a production line for salvation and scholarship. While the outside world fractured into warring kingdoms and literacy became a rare skill, even among the nobility, places like this became the sole guardians of classical learning, philosophy, and of course, sacred scripture. Your work here is not just a job, it's a sacred duty, a form of devotional practice. You are quite literally copying the Word of God, letter by painstaking letter. The room is arranged with meticulous care. The carrels are set along the walls, each one a personal, cramped station for a single scribe. In the center of the room are larger desks for the illuminators, the artists who will add the brilliant colors and gold leaf to the pages once your black ink is dry. The air smells profoundly of the tools of your trade, the sharp tannic bite of oak gall ink, the dusty animal skin scent of parchment and vellum, and the faint waxy aroma of the candles. That will be your only source of light once the brief English day begins to fail. You settle onto the hard wooden stool at your carrel. Your tools are already laid out, a ritual performed by the armarius each evening, a pot of ink, a selection of quills usually goose or swan, carefully trimmed and split upon a stone for smoothing the vellum, a knife for scraping away mistakes, and a ruler for scoring barely visible guidelines onto the page. And then there is the book itself. It's not a book yet, of course. It's a stack of treated animal skins, a quire, waiting to be transformed. You open the heavy volume you are copying from, the exemplar, its pages worn soft from the hands of countless scribes before you. The text is dense, a forest of abbreviations and cramped Latin script. Your task is to reproduce it perfectly, without error, without deviation. There is no room for creativity here, only fidelity. You take a deep breath, select a quill, dip its nib into the glossy black ink, and begin. The only sounds are the soft scratching of nib on vellum, the occasional sniffle or cough from a brother across the room, and the slow rhythmic grinding of a mortar and pestle, as an illuminator prepares his pigments in the corner. It is a silence so deep it has its own weight. And here is a wonderfully quirky, almost macabre tidbit about your new workplace. That ink you're so carefully dipping your quill into, its deep, lasting black color comes from a rather revolting process. It's iron gall ink, made by crushing the abnormal growths, called galls, that form on oak trees when wasps lay their eggs in the bark. These galls are packed with tannic acid. You then mix this powdered gall with ferrous sulfate, which alchemists charmingly called vitriol, and gum arabic to bind it all together. But the ferrous sulfate didn't come from a clean chemical lab. It was often produced by soaking iron nails in vinegar, or sometimes in something even less savory. Historians have found recipes suggesting the use of runoff from tanning yards, or even, well, let's just say the monastic pursuit of knowledge sometimes involved a truly foul concoction. So every beautiful, enduring word you write is, in a very literal sense, etched onto the page with a mixture of tree tumors and rust. It gives a whole new meaning to the phrase blood, sweat, and tears going into a book. Historians still argue whether the strict error-free copying in scriptoria was a flawless system that preserved texts with impeccable accuracy, or if the tedious eye-straining work inevitably introduced a slow creeping tide of mistakes, omissions, and misinterpretations that subtly altered meanings over centuries. As you concentrate, your tongue pressed between your teeth in fierce focus, you can feel the truth of the latter. Your eyes blur for a second, you misread an abbreviation. You dip your pen to deep and a blob of vile, tumor-based ink falls onto the pristine vellum. A wave of pure panic washes over you. A mistake isn't just an annoyance, it's a spiritual failing, a flaw in the Word of God, and a costly waste of precious materials. You grab your knife, its small blade sharpened to a razor's edge, and begin the delicate, terrifying process of scraping away your sin. The vellum is tough, but it is not infinitely forgiving. Scrape too hard and you'll tear a hole in the skin, creating an even greater disaster. This is the torment of the scribe, the pressure of perfection in an imperfect, cold, and weary body. You let out a breath you didn't realize you were holding, as the offending blot is successfully removed, leaving only a faint, thin patch behind. You will have to write over it with extra care. You look up, your neck cracking painfully, and your eyes meet those of a brother if you carols. Down he offers a tiny, sympathetic shrug. He's been there. He knows. You both return to your work, the silent scratching of quills resuming its steady, sleepy rhythm. It is in this atmosphere of intense concentration, cold, and monastic fatigue that the mind, desperate for a moment of levity, begins to wander, and sometimes, that wandering mind guides the hand to draw something entirely unexpected in the margin. The faint, ghostly patch on the vellum where you scraped away your mistake stares back at you, a permanent reminder of your fallibility. You gently run your fingertips over the surface. It's smoother now, but the skin is ever so slightly thinner there, a vulnerability in the page. You take a new quill, one you've sharpened yourself to a finer point, and with the lightest possible touch, you rewrite the word, your hand cramping with the effort of such precise control. Success. The word is restored, the flaw visible only to you. You lean back, the muscles in your shoulders screaming in protest, and you take a moment to truly look at the material you are defacing, and then restoring, with your ink. This is not paper. Paper is a distant, exotic luxury from the Arab lands, gossamer thin and frighteningly fragile. This is vellum. Or is it parchment? The words are often used interchangeably now, but there is a pedantic distinction known to the armarius. If it is made from calfskin, it's vellum, from the old French vellon. If it's from sheep or goat, it's parchment. Your page, with its particular thickness and slight grain, feels like sheep. You are writing on a transformed animal, a fact that is never far from your mind. The preparation of this writing surface is a mainstream historical fact of medieval book production, a craft as complex and foul-smelling as any other. The skin you're working on didn't arrive at your carrel clean and smooth. It arrived reeking of the farmyard and the tannery, a stiff, hairy, and thoroughly unpleasant hide. The process to turn it into a pristine page was long and laborious. First, it was washed and soaked in a lime solution for days to loosen the hair and fat. Then, it was stretched taut on a wooden frame, a hearse, and scraped relentlessly with a lunellum knife, a crescent-shaped blade, to remove every last trace of hair and flesh. It was then dried under tension, sanded with pumice, and dusted with chalk or lime to create a perfect, white, slightly abrasive surface for the ink to grip. The best leaves, the ones without blemishes or knife marks, were reserved for the most important texts, the Bibles and Psalters. The ones with visible follicles, scars, or uneven thickness ended up in less prestigious volumes, or as practice sheets for novices. You are acutely aware that the life of a single animal might only produce a handful of good folios. It is a sobering thought, this immense effort and sacrifice for the sake of words. Your inkpot, that small ceramic vessel holding the glossy, black liquid, is your other constant companion. You give it a cautious sniff. Yep, still smells faintly of metal and rot. As you dip your quill, you contemplate its creation. The armarius oversees this alchemy as well. You've seen him at work in the outer courtyard, safely away from the precious books. He takes the powdered oak galls, the apples that grow on the trees, and mixes them with the greenish crystals of vitriol. The chemical reaction is almost immediate. The pale tannic powder and the green crystals merge into a deep, sinister black when water is added. It's like watching a bruise form instantly. Then he adds the gum arabic, a precious resin from the East, to give it viscosity so it doesn't just run off the quill like water. The final mixture is left to mature, often in a sealed container, sometimes buried in the ground for a season. The result is a powerfully acidic ink that doesn't just sit on the vellum, it bites into it, etching the words permanently into the skin. This is why these books have lasted for centuries. The ink has literally become part of the animal. And here is a wonderfully quirky, practical tidbit about your toolkit that goes beyond the simple quill and ink. That knife on your desk, the one you used to scrape away your error, it's called a penknife, and it's your most versatile tool. Its primary job is to constantly trim and reshape the point of your quill. A quill wears down, surprisingly quickly against the rough surface of the vellum, becoming blunt and splintered. You are constantly stopping to shave off a millimeter, to ray-split the nib, to get that perfect flow of ink again. But the penknife is also your eraser, your page turner, your ruler scorer, and, on particularly frustrating days, your silent outlet for aggression as you stab it gently into the wood of your carrel. It's a multi-tool centuries before the concept was invented. You also have a weight, often a smooth heavy stone or a bag of sand, to hold down the edges of the vellum page, which has a maddening tendency to curl back into the scroll shape it was forced into for so long on the stretching frame. Every element of your workspace is a testament to solving a practical problem, born of this incredibly demanding craft. Historians still argue whether the shift from papyrus scrolls to parchment codices, the book form you're creating, was driven primarily by Christian theology, wanting to distance itself from Jewish scrolls, or by the simple, superior practicality of the codex. You can write on both sides. It's more compact, and it's far more durable. As you turn the heavy page of your exemplar, you feel the truth is pragmatic. A scroll containing the entire Bible would be a monstrous, unwieldy thing, a nightmare to reference during a church service. This book, when you're finished, will be heavy, but it will be manageable. It will open to the exact page needed. It is, quite simply, a better technology. You dip your pen again, the nib scraping the bottom of the small clay ink pot. It's running low. You'll need to get more from the armarius soon. A journey that will involve a break in your concentration and a walk across the cold scriptorium floor. But for now, you continue, the ink flowing onto the skin, the word becoming flesh, in a manner of speaking. The only warmth in the room is the faint heat of your own hand on the vellum, and the growing, familiar ache in your lower back. You are a machine of devotion, a translator of text, and your body is paying the price for every perfectly formed letter. The low grumble in your stomach is a persistent, distracting counter-rhythm to the scratch of your quill. It's not yet time for the main meal of the day, which won't come until after the office of sext, when the sun is at its highest point in the sky, a point it seems in no particular hurry to reach. Your back is a single, solid knot of pain, a cramped tapestry of strained muscles from hours of hunching over the desk. Your neck is stiff, refusing to turn more than a few degrees to either side, without sending a sharp protest down your spine. But these are mere background noises in the symphony of discomfort that is a scribe's existence. The real torment, the one that truly threatens your sacred work, is in your hand. It begins as a dull ache in the muscles of your forearm, a tightness that whispers of fatigue. Then it moves into your wrist, a hot pulse of pain with every delicate movement of a quill. Finally, it settles into your fingers, locking them into a claw-like cramp around the shaft of your writing instrument. This is the scribe's curse, the physical price of devotion, and it is as much a part of your daily life as the prayers themselves. This isn't just a personal complaint. It's a mainstream historical fact of medieval manuscript production. The physical toll on scribes was immense and well documented. Monastic medical texts have entire sections devoted to treating the ailments of the scriptorium. The most common was what we'd now call writer's cramp or repetitive strain injury, a debilitating condition that could sideline a productive scribe for weeks. Then there was the severe eye strain, from hours of focusing on tiny, intricate script in often terrible light. The constant exposure to the dry, dusty air of the scriptorium and the occasional toxic fumes from the illuminator's pigments led to chronic respiratory issues. And of course, the lifelong posture of bending over a desk led to the classic scholar's hump and crippling back pain. This was not a gentle, contemplative life for the body. It was a form of pious manual labor that broke you down piece by piece. The beautiful books that survive in museums today are the products of thousands of hours of pain, a pain literally etched into the bones of the anonymous men who made them. You are forced to stop. Your right hand is a useless, clenched fist. You try to pry your fingers open with your left hand, wincing at the shooting pain. This is a familiar ritual. You set the quill down carefully and begin to massage the tight muscles of your forearm, digging your thumb into the knots, trying to coax them into submission. You look around the scriptorium. You are not alone in your silent suffering. Another brother is gently rolling his neck, his eyes squeezed shut in a moment of private agony. An older monk in the corner is holding his hands up, staring at his gnarled, arthritis-twisted fingers as if cursing them for their betrayal. There is a communal aspect to this pain, a shared martyrdom. You all understand the cost of the words you produce. There are no ergonomic chairs here, no wrist supports, no advice about taking regular breaks. The only remedy is perseverance, prayer, and the application of whatever foul-smelling poultice the monastery's infirmarian has concocted for such ailments. And speaking of dubious remedies, here is a wonderfully quirky and horrifying tidbit from the medieval medical playbook for dealing with your exact situation. If the cramping and pain became truly unbearable, a scribe might be advised to try a treatment found in more than one monastic medical manual. It involved taking the grease from a fattened goat or sheep, a substance they would have had easy access to, mixing it with powdered dried worms, yes, worms, and then heating the whole disgusting concoction until it was a warm, greasy paste. This was then slathered thickly all over the aching hand and arm and wrapped in a bandage, presumably to fester for a day or two. The logic, if we can call it that, was that the cold nature of the cramp needed to be countered with the warm properties of the animal fat and worms. One can only imagine the smell and the state of the vellum after a scribe tried to return to work with a hand still slick with worm grease. It's enough to make you decide to just endure the pain. Historians still argue whether the monastic authorities viewed these physical afflictions as a regrettable side effect of the work, or if they were secretly or not so secretly seen as a form of welcome penance. Was a scribe's crippling arthritis considered a badge of honor, a tangible sacrifice offered up to God along with the beautifully copied Psalter? Did the constant pain serve to mortify the flesh and keep the scribe's mind from wandering toward more worldly temptations? As you slowly, painfully, unclench your fist and watch the color return to your whitened knuckles, you feel the answer is probably both. The pain is a nuisance, an obstacle to your work, but in a culture that venerates martyrdom and sees value in suffering, it is also a constant, humbling reminder of your own physical fragility. You are a soul trapped in a failing machine, trying to create something eternal. You flex your hand experimentally. It's still sore, but it's functional. You pick up the quill again, your grip a little looser, a little more tentative. The text on the exemplar blurs for a second. You blink, realizing your eyes are watering from the strain. You look towards the high windows. The light has changed. It's brighter now, the weak sun having finally climbed a little higher. The office of terse must have come and gone without you even noticing. So absorbed were you in your pain and your work. The rhythm of the monastery continues around you, a river flowing past your little island of torment. You take a deep breath of the cold, ink-scented air, dip your quill, and get back to work. The word you need to write next is perseverance. You almost laugh at the coincidence. Or perhaps it's divine commentary. You form the letters slowly, carefully, the pain in your hand a metronome keeping time with each stroke. This is your cross to bear, quite literally, one word at a time. The sharp, rhythmic pain in your hand has subsided to a dull, manageable throb, a background ache you've learned to accept as part of your existence, like the cold or the hunger. You're deep into the text now, copying a particularly dense passage from the book of Ezekiel, your focus narrowing to the dance of the quill and the slow unfurling of your own script. Across the vellum, The world has shrunk to the dimensions of your carol, the grain of the wood, the smell of the ink, the faint texture of the animal skin under your left hand. The other scribes have faded into a peripheral blur. Their occasional coughs or the scrape of a stool are distant, irrelevant events. This hyper-focused state is its own kind of prayer, a silent, intense meditation where the self dissolves into the work. It is in this vulnerable state of deep concentration that the distraction arrives, not with a bang, but with a purr. It is a sound so utterly alien to the scriptorium's usual symphony of scraping quills and grinding pigments that it doesn't register at first. It's just a vibration in the air, a low, rhythmic rumble that seems to emanate from the very floorboards. Then, you feel it, a soft, insistent pressure against your ankle, followed by a gentle, weaving motion through the rough wool of your habit. You startle, your quill jumping and leaving a tiny, unintended flick of ink in the margin. Annoyance flashes through you, another error to carefully scrape away, and you look down, ready to shoo away whatever brother has foolishly bumped into you. But it's not a brother. Looking up at you with eyes the color of old brass is a large, ginger cat. It completes one final figure-8 loop around your legs, its tail held high like a banner, and then with a grace that seems to mock your own physical clumsiness, it leaps effortlessly into the space between your inkpot and the open exemplar. It doesn't care about sacred texts. It doesn't care about your aching hand. It has decided, with the unshakable authority of its kind, that this is now its spot. It turns around twice, kneads the parchment with its front paws, a motion that makes your heart stop, terrified of unsheathed claws, and then settles into a compact loaf, the purr escalating into a contented drone that seems to vibrate through the wooden desk. It blinks slowly at you, a gesture of supreme trust and ownership, and then closes its eyes. Its work here done. This feline presence in the monastery is a mainstream historical fact, a practical partnership forged out of mutual need. Monasteries, with their stores of grain for bread and beer, were giant, all-you-can-eat buffets for rats and mice. These rodents weren't just a nuisance, they were a genuine threat to the very purpose of the place. They would gnaw through priceless books, devour precious food supplies, and spread disease. Cats were the most effective, self-reliant, and low-maintenance pest control system available. They were working animals, sanctioned by practicality, but their role was always ambiguous, a spiritual paradox padding on soft feet through the halls of God. The church's official stance on cats was often suspicious, sometimes linking them to paganism, witchcraft, and even the devil. Yet here they were, curled up in the scriptorium, napping in the warmest corners of the kitchen, a necessary, purring contradiction within the holy walls. You should shoo it away, you know you should. The armarius could walk by at any moment and chastise you for allowing an animal to profane the sacred writing space, but you don't, you can't. The warmth radiating from its body is a tiny, localized miracle in a freezing room. The sound of its purr is a soothing balm, a natural ASMR track that somehow eases the tightness in your neck and shoulder more effectively than any conscious effort to relax. You find your own breathing slowing to match its rhythmic rumble. The cat's simple, uncomplicated presence is an anchor to a reality outside of Latin verbs and liturgical rubrics. It is a creature of pure, present tense being. It doesn't worry about salvation, or the next office, or the quality of its penmanship. It exists. It is warm. It is content. And in this moment, by sheer proximity, some of that contentment bleeds into you. And here is a wonderfully quirky tidbit about this monastic cohabitation. Some monasteries didn't just tolerate their cats. They provided for them quite officially. There are records from certain abbés of a specific line item in their budgets for the purchase of milk or fish for the cats. They were, in a sense, on the payroll. Some even had specific roles. The Carthusian monks, for instance, are known to have kept cats specifically as mouse catchers, and the creatures were considered a standard part of the monastic household. They weren't pets in the modern, pampered sense, but they were acknowledged and valued members of the community. Their job as vital in its own way as that of the brewer or the baker. This one, currently shedding ginger hairs onto your desk, is undoubtedly earning its keep by simply existing and deterring any mouse brave enough to venture near. Historians still argue whether the medieval church's occasional persecution of cats, like the infamous papal bull linking them to Satanism, was a widespread mainstream belief, or merely the rhetoric of a few extremists that was largely ignored by practical people on the ground like abbots who valued their grain stores. Did the average monk see a helpful Mauser, or a potential familiar for witches? As you watch the sleeping cat, its sides rhythmically expanding and contracting, you suspect the answer is as varied as the men themselves. For a homesick novice, it might be a comfort, a reminder of a farm cat from childhood. For a dour, ascetic old brother, it might be a lazy indulgence. For you, right now, it is a welcome distraction, a warm paperweight, and a silent confessor who asks for nothing but a warm spot to sleep. You reach out a single, ink-stained finger and gently stroke the fur between its ears. It doesn't open its eyes, but the purr intensifies, a vibration that travels up your arm and settles somewhere deep in your chest. You smile, a rare, unforced expression. Then you pick up your quill again. The world, for a moment, feels a little less cold, a little less arduous. You have a companion. The cat is a warm, purring weight against your wrist, a living, breathing blotter that has decided your work is the most comfortable place in Christendom. To take a nap, its presence is a comfort, but also a complication. You have to move your hand with extra care to avoid jostling it, your strokes becoming even more deliberate and slow. You finish a line of text, a particularly complex passage on the four living creatures surrounding the throne of God, and you reach for the pumice stone to smooth a rough patch on the next blank section of vellum. As you do, your sleeve brushes against the cat's ear. It twitches, a single, involuntary flick of annoyance at the disturbance, and in its sleep, it stretches one paw out. Its claws, needle sharp and perfectly clean, extend and retract, scoring 5 tiny, parallel lines in the margin of the page, right next to the word domini. You freeze, a fresh wave of panic washing over you. Not an ink blot this time, but a physical scratch in the vellum itself. This is worse. This is permanent. You can't scrape this away. You gently lift the cat's paw, and it makes a soft, grumbling sound of protest but doesn't wake. You stare at the marks. They are faint, but undeniable. 5 little lines, right there in the sacred space of the page. For a long moment, you just stare at them, your mind racing through the consequences. The armarius will see it. You will be chastised. The precious vellum, the product of so much labor, is marred. But then, something shifts. Perhaps it's the cat's profound, unbothered serenity. Perhaps it's the sheer exhaustion lowering your defenses. Instead of seeing a flaw, you begin to see a shape. The 5 lines, with a little artistic license, could be the legs and tail of a creature. Almost without thinking, your hand, acting on an impulse buried deep beneath layers of monastic discipline, reaches for a finer quill. You dip it in the ink and, with a few swift, guilty strokes, you connect the lines. You draw a small, rounded body. You add a triangular head with 2 pointed ears. You give it a long, curling tail. And just like that, the cat's accidental scratch has been transformed. There, in the margin of a solemn theological text, now sits a tiny, ink-drawn cat, seemingly chasing its own tail, right next to the word Lord. This is the moment it happens. This is the birth of the doodle. You have just crossed a line, and your heart is hammering against your ribs not just with fear, but with a strange, illicit thrill. You have defaced the holy text. But have you? You've personalized it. You've added a piece of your reality, of this moment, into the eternal word. You've left a mark that is yours, and yours alone. The mainstream historical fact is that these marginal drawings, known as marginalia, are everywhere in medieval manuscripts, and cats are among the most common subjects. They chase birds, they tease dogs, they nap, they play musical instruments, they sometimes even don monks' habits, and preach to mice. They are a bizarre, delightful, and utterly human counterpoint to the severe sacred text they surround. You sit back, staring at your creation. It's crude, simple, done in the same stark black ink as the scripture itself. It is a secret, a tiny rebellion, a moment of whimsy in a life that has very little room for such things. You glance around, paranoid, but the other scribes are lost in their own worlds of pain and concentration. The armarius is at the far end of the room, his back turned, consulting a large volume. No one has seen you. The evidence is there, on the page, but it's hidden in plain sight. Just another part of the visual noise of the manuscript. A smile plays on your lips. It feels good. It feels freeing. And here is a wonderfully quirky tidbit about these feline intrusions. Sometimes, the cats didn't just inspire the drawings. They literally left their own autographs. There are actual manuscripts from this period where a page bears the unmistakable, smudged imprint of a cat's inky paw. The most famous example is in a 15th century copy of a Latin missal from Dubrovnik, where a page is adorned with several perfect, dark paw prints. One can easily imagine the scenario. A cat, just like your ginger friend, strolls across a scribe's desk, steps right in an open inkpot, and then marches across the freshly copied, not yet dry page in a panic, leaving a trail of destruction in its wake. The scribe, faced with this catastrophe, would have had two choices: scrap the entire expensive sheet of vellum and start over, or simply incorporate the accident into the work. In this case, they chose the latter. The paw prints remain, a permanent, a durable record of a very bad day in the scriptorium. Historians still argue whether these marginal doodles, these drolleries, were intentional acts of subtle rebellion against the rigid monastic system, silent protests of boredom, etched in ink, or if they were simply the medieval equivalent of fidgeting and unconscious release of mental pressure during an incredibly tedious task. Were they the scribal version of daydreaming? As you look from the real, sleeping cat to the drawn one now inhabiting your page, you feel the answer is perhaps more innocent. It wasn't rebellion, it was just play, a moment of connection, a need to inject a sliver of life, of humor, of the familiar, into the austere and the divine. The cat is here, now. The text is eternal. For one brief moment, you have allowed the now to touch the eternal. You gently scratch the sleeping cat behind its ear. You whisper, so quietly it's almost just a thought, are now part of the Word of God. The cat's purr rumbles on, a satisfied engine of chaos and comfort, completely unaware of its own immortalization. The tiny, inky cat now lives permanently in the margin, a silent accomplice to your transgression. A part of you expects a bolt of lightning, or at the very least, the stern hand of the Armarius on your shoulder. But nothing happens. The world continues. The cat sleeps. The other scribes scratch away, oblivious. The only consequence is a faint, lingering thrill that buzzes beneath your skin like a second, more vibrant kind of blood. You finish the page, your hand moving with a new, strange confidence. The cat eventually stirs, yawns widely, and leaps down from the desk to attend to whatever important feline business awaits it, leaving behind a few ginger hairs and a permanent mark on your soul. You watch it go, then look back at your work. The drawing is there. It is part of the book now, and you find you don't regret it. In fact, you find yourself looking for opportunities. This is how it begins. The doodle was not an endpoint. It was a door swinging open into a secret garden of absurdity. As the days turn into weeks, your eyes, once trained to see only this sacred text, now constantly scan the peripheries. You start to notice things you never saw before. The world of the medieval manuscript is not the sterile, solemn place you imagined. It is teeming with life, and most of it is utterly bizarre. You begin to see the margins not as empty space to be filled with God's word, but as a stage, a playground, a field of dreams for the sleep-deprived monastic mind. And your feline friend was just the opening act. The mainstream historical fact is that this phenomenon of marginalia, the drawings, sketches, and notes in the margins of manuscripts, is a vast and varied field of study. It ranges from pious devotional images to practical diagrams, from practice sketches by novice illuminators to full-blown, surreal narratives that have nothing to do with the text they accompany. But the most fascinating category is the one you've just stumbled into, the drollery or drollery. These are the whimsical, humorous, and often downright weird drawings that populate the edges of even the most serious religious texts. And once you start seeing them, you can't stop. It's like a secret society of scribes reaching out across time, winking at you from the edges of the page. You start spotting them everywhere. In a weighty volume of St. Augustine's sermons, a knight in full armor jousts with a giant snail. In his psalter, a rabbit, armed with a bow and arrow, rides a striped snail dog into battle against a group of, are those flying fish? A monkey dressed as a bishop preaches to a congregation of bemused-looking geese. A mermaid plays a harp next to a particularly dense passage on theological virtue. There are hybrid creatures with the bodies of men and the heads of roosters, dragons with rabbit ears, and musicians playing instruments made from their own elongated bodies. It is a carnivalesque explosion of the imagination, a riot of the subconscious let loose upon the sacred page. And here is a wonderfully quirky and specific tidbit about this bizarre bestiary. The snail. The image of the knight fighting a snail is one of the most common and puzzling motifs in all of marginalia. Historians have proposed dozens of theories. Was it a symbol of the Lombards, a wealthy Italian banking group despised by many, whom knights were powerless to defeat, hence the feudal combat? Was it a representation of the resurrection, as the snail reborn from its shell? Or was it simply a joke about the ultimate futility of human endeavor, the heavily armored, noble knight being stymied by one of the slowest, most defenseless creatures on earth? The truth is, nobody really knows. It's an inside joke whose punchline has been lost to centuries, leaving only the enduring, hilarious image of a man poking a mollusk with a stick. You begin to understand that you are part of a long, unspoken tradition. The urge to deface, to decorate, to play, is apparently irresistible, even in the most devout of settings. It's a pressure valve. The mind, subjected to endless hours of complex Latin and rigid doctrine, simply must rebel in some small way. It must create its own meaning, its own stories. In the blank spaces left behind, you find yourself starting to plan your own next foray into the margins, a rabbit playing the lute, perhaps, or a dog wearing a scholar's cap. The possibilities are endless. A silent rebellion of silliness against the overwhelming gravity of your task. Historians still argue whether this explosion of marginalia represents a deep, subconscious folk culture bubbling up through the cracks of organized religion, or if it was a sanctioned, even encouraged, form of mental relief for the scribes, a way to keep them sane and engaged during the mind-numbing work of copying. Did the abbots turn a blind eye because they understood the human need for whimsy? Or did they simply not care about the margins as long as the central text was perfect? As you surreptitiously sketch a small, griffin-like creature with a duck's-bill in the corner of your current page, you feel it's probably a bit of both. The work is paramount. The text is sacred. But the margins are yours. They are a place where a tired, cold, aching monk can be, for just a moment, not a copier of dreams, but a dreamer himself. The cat started it. But now you are the one chasing your own tail, in ink, forever frozen in the act of play on the edge of devotion. The secret game of marginalia has become your private rebellion, a silent language of whimsy spoken only between you, the vellum, and the ghosts of scribes past whose own doodles you've now learned to see. Your ginger muse comes and goes, sometimes deigning to grace your desk with its presence, sometimes vanishing for days on end, leaving you to your own imaginative devices. But the idea it planted has taken root and flourished. You've drawn rabbits with trumpets, birds wearing tiny spectacles, and a particularly proud snail wearing a knight's helmet. Yet as you work, a new thought begins to form, a question that wiggles into your mind during the long chant of the offices. Is this strange compulsion to draw sleepy cats and jousting snails unique to your chilly wine-battered corner of Christendom? Or is it something more universal? The answer, you slowly come to understand, is written in the very parchments that pass through your scriptorium. Your monastery is not an island. It is a node in a vast, sprawling network that stretches across Europe and beyond. Monks travel, carrying ideas and books with them. Manuscripts are loaned, copied, and traded between abbeys, from the rain-swept shores of Ireland to the sun-baked hills of Italy. And as these books move, so do the doodles within them. The cat you drew, inspired by your local Mauser, might one day be seen by a monk in a German cloister, who might smile and add a mouse of his own in the opposite margin. This creative contagion is a mainstream historical fact. The tradition of marginalia was a pan-European phenomenon, a silent, inky conversation conducted across centuries and national borders. You see evidence of this in a psalter that arrived last month from a Benedictine house in Normandy. In its margins, alongside the expected dragons and grotesques, are drawings of cats that are strikingly similar to the ones you've seen here, yet with a slightly different flair. Perhaps the ears are pointier, the tails more luxuriantly curled. Then there is the Irish Gospel Book, a masterpiece of intricate Celtic knotwork, where the spaces between the loops and spirals are filled with tiny, playful cats that could be cousins to your own. The impulse is the same. The style is uniquely local. It's a testament to the shared experience of monastic life, a universal language of boredom, devotion, and feline companionship that needs no translation. But your mind wanders even further, beyond the familiar Christian world. You've heard travelers' tales of the great libraries of the Islamic world in Baghdad and Cordoba, where scholars preserve the knowledge of the ancient Greeks. Do their scribes, copying scientific treatises and poetry, also feel the urge to doodle in the margins? You imagine a learned man in a sun-drenched scriptorium, dipping his reed pen in ink to carefully transcribe the verses of the Quran, while a sleek, short-haired cat curls at his feet. You feel a sudden, strange kinship with this unknown man across the sea. You are both engaged in the same sacred, tedious task of preservation. Is his mind also prone to wander? Does he, too, seek a moment of levity from the relentless focus? While the content of his doodles would, of course, be different, perhaps avoiding figurative images due to religious prescription, the human urge to leave a personal mark, to play, must be the same. The paw prints of cats, both literal and metaphorical, know no religious boundaries. And here's a quirky global tidbit to solidify this feeling of interconnectedness. One of the oldest and most enduring relationships between humans and cats didn't happen in a European monastery at all, but in the hold of a ship. As trade routes expanded, sailing vessels were plagued by rats that would devour food supplies and gnaw through ropes. And sails, the solution, ship's cats. These feline crew members were considered essential for a safe voyage, and they traveled the world, from the ports of Egypt to the Viking longships heading north. A cat born in Egypt might end its days in a Norwegian fjord, and its descendants would eventually find their way into a local monastery. The cats napping in your scriptorium might have sea salt in their ancestral memory, their purrs echoing the lap of waves against a wooden hull. They are global citizens, long before the concept existed. Historians still argue whether the spread of specific marginalia motifs, like the knight versus the snail, was due to the direct copying of images from one traveling manuscript to another, or if it was a case of polygenesis, the same idea spontaneously occurring to different people in different places because it simply makes a universal kind of sense. Is a tired monk in England and a tired monk in France simply equally likely to find the image of a heavily armored man being bested by a snail inherently funny? As you add a tiny, drawn fish for your inky cat to bat at, you lean towards the latter. The connection isn't always through trade routes or traveling books. Sometimes it's through the shared, universal experience of being human and of being constantly, delightfully, perplexed by the unbothered majesty of the cat. The desire to capture that juxtaposition of holy work and unholy distraction seems to be a thread woven into the very fabric of monastic life, wherever it takes root. Your scriptorium, you realize, is not alone. It is one room in a vast, global library, and in every room, there is likely a scribe, a margin, and a cat, all locked in the same silent, timeless dance. The purr of your feline companion, the gentle scratch of your quill, the shared, silent language of doodles in the margins. These things have created a comforting bubble within the cold stone walls of the scriptorium. It's easy, in this hushed space, to believe that the entire world views this small creature as you do, a helper, a comfort, a whimsical muse. But the world outside your carrel is a much darker, more superstitious place, and the Church's view of God's creation is not always one of universal benevolence. The cat, for all its practical utility, has always walked a razor's edge in the Christian imagination. Its inherent otherness, its nocturnal habits, its silent tread, its unnerving, unblinking gaze making it a canvas upon which humanity's deepest fears are projected. This duality is a mainstream historical fact. While your monastery might pragmatically value its Mausers, the wider medieval church often harbored a deep and profound suspicion of cats, particularly black ones. They were seen as creatures of the night, companions to witches and heretics, and even literal familiars of Satan. Their independence, their refusal to be fully tamed, was read not as a charming character trait, but as a sign of a rebellious, diabolical nature. In a world that demanded obedience and order, from serf to lord to monk, the cat's fierce individualism was deeply threatening. Sermons from fiery preachers would sometimes condemn them, and their populations in cities were occasionally culled in panics over witchcraft or plague. The very same animal that curled at your feet by day could be seen as a demonic agent by the light of a flickering torch. You've heard the whispers, of course, every monk has. There's an older brother, Brother Cuthbert, who always crosses himself when the ginger cat strolls past. You once saw him sprinkle holy water on the floor where it had been sleeping. You dismissed it as the eccentricity of a man who has spent too many years alone with his fears. But now, as you work on a new text, a heavy tome containing the writings of the Church Fathers on demonology, the whispers take on a new, more sinister weight. You're copying a passage that describes the various forms demons can take to tempt the faithful. The list is predictable: beautiful women, handsome men, terrifying beasts. And then, your stylus hesitates over the words, et nonum quam in specie felis nigri, cum oculis ardenibus, and sometimes in the form of a black cat, with burning eyes, a cold chill, entirely separate from the room's natural temperature, traces a path down your spine. You look over at your desk mate, currently bathing a white paw with fastidious care. It is not black. Its eyes, when they open, are a placid gold, not hellfire. But the seed of doubt has been planted. Is its purr a song of comfort, or a demon's lullaby? And here is a dark and quirky tidbit that illustrates this paranoid climate. In the 13th century, Pope Gregory IX issued a papal bull titled Vox in Rama, which formally associated black cats with devil worship. The bull described a heretical sect, whose initiation ritual involved kissing the backside of a black cat, that would later transform into a dark, human-like figure. This wasn't just backwater superstition. This was official doctrine from the highest levels of the Church. While it's unlikely this bull directly affected the day-to-day life of every monastery cat, it created an atmosphere of fear and suspicion that could turn deadly. The cat, in the eyes of the church, became a symbol of heresy and inversion, everything the orderly, God-fearing world stood against. It's a stark reminder that your cozy relationship with your scriptorium cat exists in a fragile bubble, one that could be popped by the wrong word from the wrong person. Yet, the paradox deepens. Even as the church condemned the cat in one breath, it couldn't entirely escape its practical value. How could they? The very parchments you write on, the precious grains that make the sacramental bread, all needed protection. The cat was a necessary evil, a tolerated ally in the war against vermin. This created a bizarre cognitive dissonance. The same institution that spread fears about demonic felines also, through its individual monasteries, employed and cared for them. It's a classic medieval contradiction, theory versus practice. Theologians in Paris could write terrifying tracts about cats, while an abbot in Yorkshire was still making sure the kitchen staff set out a saucer of milk for the tabby that kept the grain store safe. Historians still argue whether the medieval persecution of cats was a significant widespread phenomenon that impacted their populations, or whether it was largely rhetorical, a feature of elite theological discourse that had little bearing on the practical relationship between everyday people and monks and their animal companions. Was the average medieval person truly afraid of the cat sleeping by their hearth? Or did they, like you, see a useful and comforting presence, regardless of what the Pope said? As you watch your cat finish its bath and begin to knead the parchment again, you feel the answer is both. Superstition is a powerful, pervasive force, but so is the simple, tangible reality of a warm body that keeps the rats away and offers a moment of silent companionship in a hard world. You reach out and stroke its head again, a deliberate act of defiance against the dark words you've just copied. The cat leans into your touch, its purr reigniting like a small, contented engine. It doesn't care about papal bulls or demonology. It only cares about the present moment, and in doing so, it teaches you a small lesson about faith that isn't written in any book. Sometimes, grace has for pause and a purr. The specter of demonic cats and papal condemnations lingers for a day or two, a faint shadow in the back of your mind every time your ginger companion leaps onto the desk. But the relentless routine of the monastery is a powerful exorcist. The bells ring, the offices are chanted, the hunger in your belly gnaws, and the ache in your hand returns. The cat, for its part, remains blissfully, consistently, a cat. It shows no interest in heretical rituals, only in finding the warmest spot to nap and the occasional careless mouse. The dark thoughts recede, replaced by the more immediate, grinding reality of your work. You are no longer just drawing cats, you are copying a text by the Venerable Bede, his ecclesiastical history of the English people. And as you form the letters, tracing the history of your own land and church, a heavier, more profound realization begins to dawn on you. Pushing aside all thoughts of playful marginalia and heretical felines, you are not just a copyist, you are not even just a scribe, you are a preserver, a lifeline. The words you are painstakingly etching into this treated calfskin are not merely words, they are the fragile vessels of an entire world's knowledge. Outside these stone walls, empires have risen and crumbled, wars have raged, libraries have burned, and the great learning of the classical world, the philosophies of Aristotle, the geometries of Euclid, the histories of Tacitus has been scattered, fragmented, and very nearly lost. The mainstream historical fact, the immense weight now settling on your shoulders, is this: throughout the so-called Dark Ages, monasteries like yours were the sole fortresses guarding the flickering flame of civilization. You are a guardian on a very lonely, very cold wall. You look down at the page. Bede is describing the conversion of King Edwin of Northumbria to Christianity in the 7th century. It is a story of political maneuvering and spiritual revelation, but it is also a story, a narrative, a piece of history that would be utterly lost if not for some anonymous scribe, just like you, who copied it generations ago, and another who copied that copy, and so on, in an unbroken chain of replication that leads directly to your own trembling hand. You are not just reading history, you are touching it. You are quite literally reinscribing it into existence, ensuring it survives for another generation. The work that felt so tedious, so personally agonizing, is suddenly revealed to have a cosmic significance. Every cramp in your hand, every strained eye, is a direct investment in the future of knowledge itself. This isn't limited to church history. The books in your library, the ones you are tasked with copying, are a bizarre and wonderful mix. There are psalters and missals, yes, But there are also crumbling copies of Roman agricultural manuals, detailing how to plant crops and treat sick livestock. There are fragments of Greek medical texts, preserved first by Arab scholars and then painstakingly translated into Latin. There are star charts and philosophical discourses and poetry. The monastery is not a museum of purely Christian thought. It is an ark, and it has taken aboard of every kind of knowledge it could find, whether it was deemed holy or not simply because it was valuable. Your scriptorium is a salvage operation for the entire intellectual project of humanity. And here is a wonderfully quirky and human tidbit about this grand, noble endeavor. The scribes themselves were often hilariously aware of the immense burden they carried, and they sometimes used the only power they had, the colophon, the note at the end of a book, to complain about it. Alongside the standard here ends the work. Thanks be to God. You can find all sorts of personal asides etched into history. One famously writes, "The book is finished. Let the scribe go have a drink." Another moans, "Writing is excessive drudgery. It crooks your back. It dims your sight. It twists your stomach and your sides." A third, perhaps after a particularly long stint, pleads, "Oh, my hand." These are not the voices of lofty saints, but of tired, cold, hungry men who just wanted to be done. They are a reminder that this grand project of preservation was accomplished by flawed, grumbling, incredibly human individuals who probably would have rather been napping, much like a certain cat. Historians still argue whether this preservation of classical knowledge was a deliberate, conscious policy of the medieval church, or if it was a happy accident, a side effect of monks simply copying whatever old books they managed to get their hands on, often without fully understanding or even approving of the pagan content they were saving. Did they recognize they were guardians of a flame, or were they just following orders, one word at a time? As you finish a sentence by bead and dip your pen for the next, you feel the truth is, as always, messy. The abbot and the armarius likely understand the broader mission. You, the lowly scribe, are mostly focused on the next word, the next line, the next meal, the next office. Yet, in performing that focused, mundane task with care, you are unconsciously participating in something vast and eternal. The cat, now asleep on a pile of scrap vellum, is a comfort, but the book taking shape under your hand, that is a legacy. You are saving the world, one cramped letter at a time, and all you really want is for your hand to stop hurting, and for the bell for dinner to ring. The weight of your duty as a preserver of knowledge is a mantle that is both too large and strangely comforting. It justifies the pain, the cold, the endless repetition. You are a single, vital link in a chain stretching back to the ancients and forward into a future you cannot imagine. This thought carries you through another week of toil. But today, as you near the end of a particularly long and dry theological treatise, something new and distinctly personal stirs within you. The chain is made of individuals, and you are not just a link, you are a person. You have a name, you have a story, and for the first time, you feel a powerful, almost irresistible urge to prove it, to leave a mark that is not a cat, not a rabbit, not a symbol, but simply you. The text ends, the final sentence is complete, the last period a firm, black dot on the creamy vellum. Below it lies empty space, a void waiting to be filled. This is the place for the colophon, the formal closing statement. The standard formula runs through your mind, explicit hic liber, Dei, gratia, amen. Here ends this book, by God's grace, amen. It is anonymous, safe, and pious. You raise your quill to write it, but your hand hesitates. The mainstream historical fact is that these colophons are often the only place where the anonymous scribe, the ghost in the machine, ever steps into the light. It is here, in these final lines, that the individual emerges from the communal fog of monasticism, if only for a fleeting moment. For every 10 books that end with a simple thanks be to God, there is one where the scribe simply cannot help himself. He must speak. You throw caution to the wind. Instead of the standard formula, you begin to write in a slightly smaller, more personal script. Finito libro, referemus gratias Christo. The book is finished. Let us give thanks to Christ. So far, so good. Then you continue, your heart beating a little faster. Qui scripsit scribat, semper cum Domino vivit. May he who wrote this write on. May he always live with the Lord. A common blessing. And then, the leap, me fecit, made by me, and you write your name, your Christian name, the one you were given at birth, the one you rarely use anymore. It looks strange and powerful on the page, a declaration of existence in a world that asks you to erase yourself. It is your signature on a millennium of work, but it doesn't feel like enough. The urge to confess, to complain, To connect with some unknown future reader is too strong. You add another line, a quiet sigh etched into eternity. Vivat etiam in pace. May he live in peace. It is a hope, a prayer for yourself. And then, the dam breaks, the words pour out of you, a tiny, inky rebellion against the silence. O lectrum frustra, si velis disere, or a promi, non audiat, iam mortuus estate. Oh, futile reader, if you wish to say, pray for me, he will not hear. He is already dead. It is a stunning, melancholic admission of your own mortality, a message in a bottle tossed into the sea of time. You are telling your future reader that you will be gone, that your prayers are no longer for sale, that this book is all that is left of you. It is profoundly sad, and yet, in writing it, you feel a surge of vitality. You have asserted your selfhood. You have said, I was here. And here is a wonderfully quirky and relatable tidbit from these personal colophons. Sometimes, the scribes didn't get philosophical. They just got really specific about their complaints. One famous colophon from a Swiss monastery reads, the book is finished. Let the scribe go have a drink. Another, perhaps after a particularly grueling winter in an unheated scriptorium, writes, the end of the book. Thanks be to God, my hand is very cold. A third offers a more holistic assessment of his suffering. Writing is excessive drudgery. It crooks your back. It dims your sight. It twists your stomach and your sides. These are not lofty spiritual insights. They are the grumbles of a coworker you've never met, reaching out across 8 centuries to say, this job is killing my back. It's a timeless human impulse. You've just done a version of it yourself, complaining about your own impending death to a stranger. It's the medieval equivalent of tweeting a complaint about your office's broken air conditioning, but with far more permanence. You sit back, staring at your words. The ginger cat, as if sensing the profound shift in your energy, leaps onto the desk and sniffs at the fresh ink of your name. It leaves a tiny DAMP nose print next to the letters. You don't even bother to wipe it away. Let it be there too. Let the cat sign its name alongside yours. Historians still argue whether these personal colophons were tolerated acts of self-expression or secretive transgressions that had to be hidden in the Latin formulaic language, knowing the abbot might not approve of such vanity. Was it a sanctioned release valve, or a tiny act of defiance? As you look at your name, your confession of mortality, and the cat's nose print, you feel it is the latter. This is your secret. This is your soul, pinned to the page like a butterfly. The armarius might see it and frown. The abbot might order it scraped away. But for now, it is there. You have carved your initials into the tree of knowledge. You are no longer just a scribe. You are a man. You were here. You existed. And with that final, terrifying act of individuality, you set down your quill. The book is done. The finality of the finished book, with your name and your melancholic cipher ever a part of it, leaves you with a strange emptiness. The scriptorium feels different now. The same cold air, the same scent of ink and vellum, the same sound of scratching quills. But the context has shifted. The work continues, of course. There are always more books to copy, more prayers to transcribe, more knowledge to preserve. But a subtle change is in the air, a shift you've been feeling for years, but are only now beginning to truly understand. The world outside the monastery walls is changing, and the echoes of that change are finally reaching your silent carol. The scriptorium, once the beating heart of intellectual life in the West, is slowly, imperceptibly, becoming a relic. The mainstream historical fact is that the monastic scriptorium's monopoly on knowledge was not destined to last forever. The 12th century saw the rise of the first universities in cities like Bologna, Paris, and Oxford. These were not secluded communities of monks but bustling, secular institutions where knowledge was debated, challenged, and expanded upon by lay scholars and students. The demand for books exploded, and it could no longer be met by the slow, painstaking, one book at a time production of monasteries. A new economic model was born, the commercial workshop. In cities, lay scribes and illuminators, working for pay, began to produce books for wealthy patrons, students, and a growing literate middle class. The book was becoming a commodity, not just a sacred object. You've seen evidence of this new world. A traveling scholar, seeking shelter for a night, showed you a volume he had purchased in Paris. The script was different, a faster, more utilitarian Gothic hand, not the stately Carolingian minuscule you were trained in. The illuminations were flashier, more fashionable, less devout. It was a beautiful book, but it felt different. It lacked the silent, prayerful aura of a book born in a place like this. It was made for study and show, not for liturgy. The scholar spoke of stationers who would loan out individual quires of a book to multiple scribes to copy simultaneously, dramatically speeding up production. The idea is horrifying and thrilling all at once. The sacred, solitary act of creation is being industrialized. Even the tools are changing. The scholar mentioned a new invention from the Arab world that is slowly making its way west. Paper, made from pulped rags. It is far cheaper and faster to produce than vellum. You try to imagine writing on something that isn't the skin of an animal, something that doesn't have its own history and texture. It feels sacrilegious, and yet, the practical part of your mind understands the revolution it represents. If books are cheaper, more people can own them, knowledge can spread. Your life's work of preservation might one day become obsolete because the thing you are preserving will be so common it no longer needs to be kept in a fortress. And here is a quirky, poignant tidbit about this transition. As the world moved on, the old monastic scriptoria sometimes became time capsules. While lay workshops chased the latest stylistic trends, monasteries often clung to their traditional methods and scripts. This means that a book produced in a place like yours in the 14th century might look oddly old-fashioned, even archaic, compared to a sleek new product from a Parisian workshop. The very isolation that allowed monasteries to save knowledge now sometimes trapped them in the past. They became living museums of the book arts, producing beautiful, devout, and increasingly anachronistic objects in a world that was starting to demand speed, efficiency, and the new. Your painstakingly drawn cats, once a symbol of whimsical rebellion, might one day be seen as charmingly rustic compared to the professional illuminations of a city master. Historians still argue whether the decline of the monastic scriptorium was a rapid collapse due to external pressures like the printing press or a long, slow, graceful fading away, as monasteries simply could not compete with the scale and efficiency of commercial production and, later, the mechanical press. Did the monks see the end coming? Or did they continue their work in blissful ignorance of the revolution brewing in the cities? As you prepare a new sheet of vellum, smoothing it with pumice with a ritual that is centuries old, you feel a pang of something like grief. You are part of a dying tradition. The chain you are so proud to be part of is nearing its end. The world may still need the knowledge, but it will soon no longer need you to copy it. The bell for Vespers rings, its sound unchanged for hundreds of years. You rise from your carol, your back stiff, and join the line of brothers. The routine continues, the prayers continue, but the purpose is shifting beneath your feet like sand. The scriptorium is getting quieter, not because of enforced silence, but because there are fewer of you, and your work is becoming a specialty, a curiosity. You are no longer a soldier on the front lines, you are a caretaker in a memorial garden, and through it all, the cat continues to nap, utterly unconcerned with economics, universities, or the march of progress. Its world begins and ends with the warmth of the sun through the high windows, and the occasional mouse. In its timeless indifference, you find a strange comfort. The slow decline you sense is not a dramatic fire or a sudden edict. It is a quiet fading, like the ink on a page left in the sun. The rhythm of the monastery continues. The bells still ring with the same iron certainty, but the scriptorium is indeed quieter. Fewer novices show an aptitude or interest in the painstaking art of the scribe. The world outside offers faster paths to knowledge and glory. Yet, the work you and generations before you accomplished does not vanish. It simply changes hands. The books you copied, the pages you saved from oblivion, begin a new journey. They are no longer just tools for liturgy or study within these walls. They are becoming treasures, physical bridges to a past that is receding ever faster. This transition is a mainstream historical fact. As monasteries dissolved or saw their influence wane, their vast libraries were scattered. Some books were lost to time, neglect, or the occasional fire, but many were seized by wealthy collectors, acquired by the new universities, or locked away in the vaults of kings. Your painstakingly copied Psalter, the one with the tiny cat in the margin, might one day find itself in the library of a Renaissance prince. Valued not for its prayers but for its beauty and its age, it becomes an artifact, a specimen of a vanishing craft. The very isolation that allowed the monastery to preserve these works now makes them objects of fascination for a world that has moved on. The book you made as an act of devotion is now a curiosity, a window into what the new age is already starting to call the Dark Ages. You think of your own colophon, your name and your plea to the future reader. That reader is no longer a monk who will chant from this book. He is a scholar, an antiquarian, a collector. He will wear fine clothes, not a woolen habit. He will examine your work under the light of a glass window. not a flickering candle. He will not pray for your soul, as you asked. He will assess the quality of your script, the style of your illumination, the curious nature of your marginalia. Your personal sigh of mortality has become a data point for his research. There is a deep irony in this, a separation between your intent and your legacy that you could never have imagined. The soul you poured onto the page is now a subject of study, and here is a wonderfully quirky, modern tidbit about this afterlife of manuscripts. The very paw, prints, and doodles that were accidents, jokes, or secret rebellions have become some of the most studied and beloved aspects of these books. Academics now write entire papers, titled Feline Figurations in the Marginalia of the Winchester Psalter. Your sleepy cat has achieved a kind of immortality you never dreamed of. Its image reproduced in glossy art books and digital archives. Its whimsy analyzed by PhD candidates. The worm-based ink and the sheepskin page are now scanned at ultra-high resolution. Their details visible to anyone in the world with an internet connection. The intimate, cold, and lonely world of the scriptorium has been blasted open by the glare of global scrutiny. The cat you drew to stay sane is now a star. This new life for your work is not without its own perils. Those same wealthy collectors who prize the books sometimes prize them too much. You would be horrified to learn that in the centuries to come, a common practice among certain book owners would be to literally cut out the beautiful illuminated initials or the charming marginal drawings from manuscripts they acquired. They would paste these fragments into albums or frame them as individual works of art, completely destroying the integrity of the book you worked on for months. A psalter might be dismembered, its pages scattered across a dozen different libraries and private collections on different continents. Your cat might be physically separated from the text it once playfully inhabited, a lonely fragment in a display case, its context forever lost. The preservation of the part comes at the cost of the whole. Historians still argue whether the transition of manuscripts from sacred objects to secular collectors' items represents a tragic loss of their original meaning and spiritual power, or if it was a necessary step in their survival. Would your psalter have survived if it had remained in a monastery that eventually fell into ruin? Or was its value as a beautiful commodity the very thing that ensured it was protected and preserved, even if for the wrong reasons? As you gently close the cover of a completed book, feeling the solid weight of the wood and leather in your hands, you feel a pang of melancholy. You made this to be used, to be prayed from, to be a living part of God's work. You cannot imagine it behind glass, silent and untouched, a museum piece. Yet, that fate might be what saves it. The legacy of your labor, and that of every scribe before you, is no longer in your hands. It is being passed on, into a future you cannot control, where your devotion is called art, your pain is called craft, and your secret doodle of a cat is called a historical treasure. The book is finished. Its journey is just beginning. The world has shifted irrevocably outside the monastery walls, and the echo of that change has settled into the very stones of the scriptorium. The frantic pace of commercial book production, the rise of the universities, the slow seep of paper into the world, these are currents in a river that now flows past your quiet inlet. Yet, as you sit at your carrel for what feels like the 1000th time, a profound sense of peace descends upon you. The urgency is gone. The need to be the lone guardian of light in a dark world has faded. What remains is the work itself, stripped of its monumental weight, reduced to its purest form, a man, a pen, and a page. The legacy is no longer a worry for the future. It is a simple, present tense act. You are not saving civilization tonight. You are just drawing a cat, and so, you allow your mind to drift. The text before you is familiar. A portion of the Psalms you've copied so many times, the words are etched on the back of your eyelids. Your hand moves almost automatically, forming the letters with a muscle memory that has long since bypassed conscious thought. This freedom from focus allows your awareness to expand, to soften at the edges. You are no longer just in the scriptorium. You are in the long, unbroken line of all the scribes who ever were. You think of the Irish monk on a windswept rock in the North Atlantic, drawing a cat in the margin of his gospel to keep the sea monsters of loneliness at bay. You think of the Italian scholar in a sunlit room, a sleek cat at his feet, perhaps doodling a geometric pattern in the margin of his Arabic geometry text. You think of all the tired hands, the sore backs, the eye-strained gazes that have ever sought a moment's respite in the gentle, whimsical act of creation. The mainstream historical fact is that this tradition, this thread of shared experience, is the true legacy. Far more than any single book, it is a fellowship of fatigue and quiet rebellion, A secret society with no password other than a shared understanding of the need to make a mark, however small. Your own ginger muse is curled in its usual spot, a soft, warm paperweight of contentment. Its purr is the only sound in the room, a low, vibrational hum that seems to sync with the rhythm of your own heartbeat. You look at it, and then you look at the small, simple drawing of a cat you'd added to the margin earlier. The real and the represented, the living animal and the eternal idea. The quirky, delightful truth is that these doodles, these moments of unvarnished humanity, have achieved a kind of immortality that the dense theological texts they surround often lack. In the modern world you cannot see, your cat, and cats like it, will be shared across something called the internet, bringing a moment of joy and connection to people who will never set foot in a monastery or read a word of Latin. Your private joke, born of cold and fatigue, will become a public treasure, the paw prints of history, as cats have left marks far deeper and more enduring than anyone could have imagined. Historians will still argue, of course, about the precise psychological impetus behind every marginal doodle. Was it boredom, rebellion, spiritual expression, a simple love of cats? But as you set down your quill for the final time, the debate feels irrelevant. The reason doesn't matter, the act does. The act of creating something for no other reason than it brought a moment of light into a long, dark day. That impulse is the thread that connects you to every human who has ever lived. The light is fading from the high windows now, the long evening of the world drawing in. But the gentle, rumbling purr of the cat continues, a sound out of time, a lullaby for the ages. You close your eyes, not to sleep, but to listen, to feel the vibration travel through the wood of the desk, up through the bones of your weary arm, and into your chest. The cat, the book, the quiet room, it all begins to blur into a soft, pleasant haze. The distinctions between past and present, between devotion and doodle, between you and every other scribe who ever sought comfort in a furry companion, all of it melts away, leaving only the purr, a constant, soothing frequency on which your thoughts gently drift. And so we let the imagery soften now, allowing the sharp edges of the stone cloister and the rough texture of the vellum to blur into something more like a dream. That purr you've been imagining, the soft, rhythmic engine of the contented cat. Let that sound become the anchor for your own breathing, each inhale and exhale finding a natural, easy pace alongside it. The struggles of those scribes, their cold fingers and aching backs, their moments of doubt and their flashes of quiet joy, all of that can gently recede now, leaving behind only the warmth of that simple, timeless companionship. There is no more work to be done tonight, no more words to copy, no more history to preserve. Your watch is over. The guardians of knowledge have passed the torch, and the world, for all its noise and chaos, has kept those precious flames safe. The cats, both real and drawn, have done their job, leading us not into dark corners of superstition, but into the soft, welcoming light of a shared, gentle humanity. So allow your own thoughts to curl contentedly at the edges, like a page gently warmed by the sun. There is no need to hold onto anything anymore, not the stories, not the facts, not the images. Let them all go, as easily as lifting a hand from a page. You are safe, you are warm. The long day is finally done, and all that is left is the soft, dark, silent peace of a world asleep, soothed by the timeless, vibrating hum of a history that is at its heart just a story about people and the cats who kept them company. Let that hum be the last thing you hear, a gentle frequency carrying you away from this room, this time, into the deepest, most restful of sleeps.